cabinet, 20 ministers, and the whole undersecretary, the number 2. So it will be around 80 people in the room. And you will have to explain your position in front of economists, lawyers, engineers, generals, admirals. I must confess, I was a little afraid, because for the first time I had this incredible opportunity. And I said, I have to say the truth. I have to be myself. I cannot simply say on the one hand, on the other hand. And I went full force for a full hour. And very honestly, I told them, look, this can be done, but this means that you have to give away power. Imagine telling a military government that they have
to relinquish
power,
yes,
economic and social power. And at the end of the process, you have to relinquish political power. Because for a system of free markets, I believe the rule of law is crucial. And you cannot have the full force of the rule of law if you don't have a democratic system.
So after this, you were offered to join the government as a Secretary of Labour and Social Affairs.
Yes. A few months later, because I went on TV, and one of my most important reforms was to transform the pension system of my country. That was bankrupt. It was managed by the government. It was, as it's called technically, a pay-as-you-go system, created by von Bismarck in the 19th century.
And we had a similar system in Sweden called the ATP system, which meant that
Europe.
This generation paid for the older ones and hoped that their children would pay for them.
Exactly. That is the basic idea. But regrettably, you see, in our Latin countries, and also in Latin Europe, France, Italy, Spain, the system has also incredible amount of privileges to the people who are more powerful. Less so in Sweden, less so in the US, less so in the Anglo-Saxon countries. In other countries, the system had two problems. One is the demographic one, that is very well known. But the second was the incredible political manipulation. You gave favors to people whose votes you wanted.
Specific interest groups.
Specific interest. For example, in Paris, you always have a strike because the truck drivers want to retire at 55, paid by the rest of the country. So I had this idea at Harvard of giving people the possibility of having a personal retirement account, of saving for old age, of owning your money, of course saving in a very secure way,
yes,
very diverse.
And controlled, strict, yes.
And why? Because I thought that it was not only a good retirement system, it was also good for empowering the people. I believe in that sense that Karl Marx was up to something when he said, if workers only have their labor to sell in the market, they will be alienated from society because they will own nothing. He was correct there. Where he was terribly wrong was that he said the solution to that is for the government to own all companies, because then the workers will own everything. But we know that only a Politburo of old people will own everything. So I said, no. I would like to make every worker an owner, a small capitalist.
Like a shareholder society?
Like a shareholder society, but individually, through the market. It was at that time a very revolutionary concept.
But these are
applied any place in the world.
No, it hadn't. But these are, on the other hand, very classical liberal concepts. How come that Chilean generals with like all military who are in a planned situation, also with a Chilean inheritance from actually German military way of solving things, accepted as such a pure liberal theory or approach?
To be very honest, the military, you must remember, they came up because Chile was in the midst of political violence. We had a Marxist government that wanted to implement a communist system. The country rebelled. The Chamber of Deputies approved a resolution of August 22, 73, saying the government should go because even though it was elected democratically, it's not behaving democratically. So the military came on to fight basically a communist insurgency. But they didn't know at all about economics. They, in general, as you say very well, they were Prussian-minded, you see, a centralized collectivist society. So it was a very difficult task of us, the classical liberal economists, to educate hundreds of them. Because the generals, the colonels, the majors, the captains, and at the same time all their advisors, because they don't operate in a vacuum. They have lawyers, they have economists, they have mothers-in-law that on the weekend make their opinions. See, every person has a group of reference among them. So, and the whole Chilean society was a little semi-socialist, as most Latin America is. So it was an incredible task of education. Thanks God, you see, all these economists that came in with me were also professors. We basically were professors, but professors who wanted to change the world, who wanted to go into the public arena, who wanted to be ministers in order to make a difference, not to stay forever there. We were not politicians as such, even though I have a great respect for someone who represents people in an honest way. But we were not after a political career. So basically we convinced them. We took over the economic part of the government. The government was basically with a foreign threat. We were in a big problem with two of our neighbors, Argentina and Peru. And they still were fighting the sort of anti-terrorist war in Chile, very exaggerated incidentally, and where they committed some violations of human rights that are really deplorable. But they were focusing on that, the internal and the external security threats. So we, the economists, said, well, allow us to manage the economy and build a new economic system, a completely different strategy in order to be able to grow at 7%, have full employment, eliminate or attenuate poverty. And in that way, we will create the basis for a stable democracy in Chile.
Could this success have occurred in Chile without the existence of the military regime of General Pinochet?
Of course. And this is very important because it would be completely irresponsible for someone like me who have done this reform to say this can only be done in a military government. Because I have been asked this question all over Latin America, all over the third world. And sometimes the people wanted me a response, this can only be done with generals.
Yes, you have, the prerequisite is not a military regime.
No, the prerequisite is a team of professionals, in this case they were economists, who believe strongly in personal liberty, in freedom, in a free society. And the clear fact is that in Latin America we have had 1,000 military governments, and 999 of them have been a disaster, have not changed the economy, have been repressive only, have never given back power to civil society in a voluntary way. The Argentinian military went out only after they made a mistake of invading the Falklands and they had to fight Margaret Thatcher. The Peruvian generals made a disaster of the economy and they were thrown out, and so on and on. So this is not really a military government. I believe it's a mistake. I would call this a freedom revolutionary government headed by historical circumstances by a general, but the general was not managing the economy. It was being managed by a team of people who really wanted to decentralize economic and social power. That is the essence of the Chilean reform. So I want to be very clear. You can do this clearly in a democratic government. And my life in the last 30 years has been going around the world, sharing my experience in pension reform and doing this reform in 20 countries, all of them democratic.
And it was not only the pension reform and the privatization of the pension funds or individualization of them, but